Okay, we're here for another episode of Perspective on Athletics, and today we have Dr. Darin Wilson, and Darin is the Director of Athletics at Georgia Gwinnett College. Georgia Gwinnett is a very brand new campus, only been around about 10 years or so, and the athletic program even fewer years than that. So Darin's going to talk us through what it's been like to build that program from scratch. But before we do that, Darin, really appreciate you taking time out of a busy schedule and joining us here.
Oh, Mark, thanks so much. Yeah, really glad to be here.
Well, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I can't wait to learn a little bit more about what it's been like to build a program from nothing and very quickly build it into something that's highly competitive and very high quality. But before we get to that, we want to learn a little bit more about you and your background and your career path. So could you give us kind of an overview of your career path and how you ended up at Georgia Gwinnett?
Sure. Grew up in central Kentucky, played baseball at the University of Kentucky for a couple years, and decided to transfer to a small school, Union College, and really spent a long time at Union, was with Union for almost 17 years as a player, graduate assistant, and then head baseball coach, and was fortunate, became a head baseball coach at 25, so was very young, and that first year actually had coached some players that had played with me, so that gets your feet to the fire really quickly when you're in that situation. And coached baseball there for 5 years, and then at the end of that was again in just a good situation to be named AD. Got the AD job there. I was 30 and spent almost 9 years there as AD at Union, and then this position came open, and it was an interesting transition even here because when I looked at Georgia Gwinnett at first, I didn't know anybody. They didn't know me, and literally I read the job description from the NCAA website and thought, man, they've written this for me. You know, who gets to go in, build their own program, build their own facilities, hire their own people, and do it from scratch. And so extremely fortunate to be at the right place at the right time and to be at Georgia Gwinnett College.
Great. Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about the transition to Georgia Gwinnett, but going back to Union, you started out as a coach, and that's not uncommon for many ADs, but as you were coaching and just, starting out, had you always aspired to be an athletic director, or did that kind of happen, by chance, or what was that transition like?
Well, I always wanted to lead. I mean, even growing up, I point guard on the basketball team, played shortstop on the baseball team, and just always wanted to lead, whatever that might be and what field that may be in. And really growing up, I always wanted to coach, and particularly wanted to coach baseball. I played basketball all the way through and could have played some small college basketball, but always liked baseball a little better, was a little better at baseball, and just felt like my personality fit a little better with the baseball game. And so once I had the opportunity to coach and got to do that for, again, 5 years, and we had some success there, broke the school record for wins at the time, and felt like I was in a situation where it was either time to try to make a transition somewhere else and continue to do this, or try to run the whole thing, if you will. And again, the situation just worked out. The AD left in the middle of the year, and I had done some things there, obviously from a baseball perspective, and they gave a guy a shot at a young age, and we just kind of ran with it from there.
Well, that's a great story, and like I say, it's not that uncommon, but everybody, not always sets out to become an athletic director, and sometimes those opportunities present themselves, but I think you hit the nail on the head, and that it's leadership, and I think you were in a position to lead. Which transitions me to Georgia Gwinnett. Now, you mentioned you saw the job description, and you felt it was tailor-made for you. Not everybody might look at starting a program from scratch as the ideal job description, but what was it in particular beyond the job description that you thought, yeah, this is the right situation for me?
Well, and it's interesting you said that, because I'll chase that just a little bit. And certainly in my first year here, I've spoken to a lot of different places and gotten to do the chamber circuits and that kind of thing. And I've made the comment several times that building a program from scratch or starting something is not for everyone. There are certainly people that are better gifted to start things, get things up and running, and then hand that off down the road. And then I think there are situations where people are better off coming in where it's already established. And here, certainly, we've had a lot of successes, but there's been a lot of hard work and a lot of hours that have went into that. But really, Mark, when I came on campus for the on-campus interview, I had a phone interview with the committee. It wasn't on Skype, so I didn't get to see them. They couldn't see me. Literally, it was just a phone conversation. And they had told me going into it, they said it'll be about 30 minutes, so plan on that. Well, my phone, just like yours, probably has a timer on it, and at the end of that time, it was 19 minutes. And I thought, well, that either went really well or that didn't go so well. You know how that goes. And anyway, ended up going well, and they invited me to campus. And when I first walked on campus, for those that have been here and are in Georgia and have seen Georgia Gwinnett, it's really a unique campus, being that it's only 8 or 9, now 10 years old. Everything's new here. The buildings are new, the sidewalks are new, the lights are new. I came from a campus that was founded in 1879 at Union. You had a few new things, but you had historical type buildings. Here you don't have that, so it's a different look. And literally, when I walked down to our, we've got a state-of-the-art library here and just a gorgeous student center. When I walked down there for the first time and then looked at the intramural fields that they had built here, they've got a $100,000 press box for an intramural field. I looked around and thought, you know what? If they're building these types of facilities here for general students and just as a campus as a whole, we got a chance to do something special here from an athletics perspective.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you about, is that I think everything that the athletic program is projecting is high quality. Just from your website to the programs you've put together to the facilities that you've built, it is high quality top to bottom, and that's been impressive. And it looks like the college as a whole is approaching this with the right mindset. But can you speak to that a little bit? Where does athletics fit into the college's plan? And is that part of the reason you're seeing such high quality commitments to facilities and things like that?
Well, sure. Former president, the president that hired me was a retired brigadier general from West Point. Our current president's from West Point. He has a rowing background, and so there's some athletic prowess there, if you will, from our presidents. But really, it came from our student body. The student body kind of rallied around and said, we'd love to have athletics here. We sit in the heart of Gwinnett County, almost 900,000 people in this county, and it's a crazy sports county for all sports here. And so really it came up from the student body. The students went to the president and said, we'd love to do this. They did some surveys, and that's really how the initial 6 sports were started here. There are very few things that I probably don't have my handprint or thumbprint on, and that's one of them. They had the sports chosen before I got here, and that was based on student surveys for the most part.
Interesting. So because Georgia Gwinnett has such a large student body, it's not a factor in enrollment at all. It's purely came out of a student's desire that this is going to add to the campus atmosphere, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. As you know, at a lot of small colleges now, and small private colleges particularly, as the AD, you have to remind yourself you're there to produce athletes as well as bring in students, because during my time at Union, we went from 13 programs to 23 programs. Most of that was because of enrollment. We were certainly building enrollment through athletics, and here it's not the case. Here you've got the ability to come in, really try to put the best product we can out on the fields and courts of competition, and build this thing as well as we can from the ground up with the student athlete in mind, rather than trying to just build it from an enrollment perspective.
Well, while you may not have been the one that had your handprint on selecting which sports were going to be started up, you certainly were the one charged with hiring the coaches and building the program and getting them off the ground and running. Speak to that a little bit. Like you've already alluded to, it's not an easy task. It's not for everybody. What were some of those early days like in terms of the challenges that you were up against, or just kind of describe what that was like on campus and for you in the department that was probably just you at some point. What was that whole process like?
No, absolutely. I was hired August 15th, 2011, and I've told this story several times. Literally, they gave me a small office in the student center, a phone, and a computer, and they said, go. And so we had a lot of things we had to get going, including applying for the NAIA and trying to tell them what we were going to build and what was going to be here and what facilities were going to look like, and who we were going to hire and how that was going to work. So no, you're right. A lot of long hours, especially from start to finish, and made a few adjustments as we went along, as you can imagine. One of the things here, being at a state school, you've got a lot of state regulations. There's red tape that I never dealt with before from a private institution, and one of those things that I noticed early on was I better hire an athletics business manager, somebody that can come in and coordinate everything from a business office side, because you get spoiled at a small college at times. You can lean on the assistant controller or the controller, and they'll do a lot of that paperwork or things for you. Well, here it doesn't work that way. They expect you to have it all done, then you just send it over there and they process it. And so, we tweaked some of those things. In terms of hiring, we really set out, Mark, from the very beginning to hire the best people we could possibly hire. And it took some time with certain key hires. I told you about Ned Colgrove, our assistant AD for external relations. It took us 7 or 8 folks coming in on campus before we finally got to Ned. We hired Chase Hodges, who's done a great job with our tennis program, who came from Georgia State, was the conference coach of the year at Georgia State the year before he came here. It took me 7 or 8 tennis coaches and countless conversations and lunches and dinners with him to finally get him here. So it was a lot of work, but again, I knew, and as you know, being in athletics administration, if you don't have good folks working for you and working with you, you're in trouble. And so if we've had any success here, the reason we've had the success is because of the people that we've been able to bring in. And we've put some vision out there, obviously, and we've set things in motion of how we want things to go. But our folks have really done a great job coming in and taking the bull by the horns and running with this thing.
Well, that's a good point, and I want to ask you about that. Finding the right person is one thing, but convincing that person to take the job is another, and you kind of hinted at that. So I want you to kind of expand upon that a little bit more, but also transition that then into the recruitment of student athletes, because it might be very similar with starting up a program. Certainly there's opportunities, but there may have been some challenges there as well.
Well, no question. And really, as we were bringing in our initial staff, we were recruiting the staff just as we were recruiting the student athletes to a vision, and really to boards that said, this is what we're going to build. This is what this is going to look like. This is what our athletics complex will look like in a year. And they're looking at a field really of kudzu. There's 25 acres here that was here for obviously for a long, long time that had just been kudzu. And so people from the community would drive by and say, "You're really going to build something there? Is this really going to happen?" And the coaches and really our administration were the same way. I mean, they believed what we were selling, and fortunately, we were in a position where the funding was in place, so we knew the money was there. We knew we were going to be able to build. We weren't having to say, "Look, this is something that we're trying to raise money for. We've got the funding here. We're going to break ground." Now, did that take some time, and did we make all kinds of tweaks? And when you're working with architects and again state regulations and so on and so forth, it takes some time. But certainly, not only did our inaugural student athletes have to believe in us a little bit, certainly so did our inaugural staff.
Yeah. And so it sounds like the majority, or at least a big portion of your funding is coming from student fees. Is that the structure? It
is. The two really separate entities with our student fees. So part of our student fees goes to operations, and then the other part is actually going to pay the bond payment on our facilities. And then, again, I mentioned Ned Colgrove earlier. He's in and doing a lot of, if not all of our corporate sponsorships and fundraising type activities for the department.
Right. Well, certainly there are lots of challenges, and you seem to be navigating those quite well, but there's also some opportunities, I'm sure, that come with starting a brand new program. You mentioned the local county, the surrounding area, large population, and maybe the only college in town, but you're certainly not that far away from major metropolitan areas. What has it been like in terms of opportunities to create a fan base or support or external relations opportunities to generate those corporate sponsorships or fundraising opportunities? Yeah,
great question. The city of Lawrenceville in particular, and the mayor, Judy Jordan Johnson, has been unbelievable with us. She's at about every event that we host. There's a great town and gown relationship here with the college and the town. Gwinnett County in itself has been super again. They've really embraced us. And so absolutely, our fan experience has been good to this point. Is it where we want it to be? Absolutely not. And still trying to get folks to recognize what this G-Claw means, and that it's Georgia Gwinnett and who that is. And the thing that's been really fun and interesting is building something from scratch that didn't exist 3 years ago to where now it's splashed pretty well, at least regionally here. Now when we go out in the community, they start to recognize it, and they're saying, "Hey, you're Georgia Gwinnett, and boy, y'all doing great things." And not only from an athletic standpoint, but from a college standpoint, we've just built a new allied health and science building that's unreal. And so again, we've started nursing here. So just the academic piece of it is coming together too, because it's still a fairly new institution, as far as the broad scale of colleges and universities go throughout the country.
Well, so it makes sense that you've got an automatic built-in base or opportunity base for corporate sponsorships or a fan base because the population is there. The campus is brand new, though, relatively speaking. So when you talk about fundraising or building your Grizzly Club, for example, alumni typically are a big part of those types of groups, but your alumni is so young and probably not a very large base. How is your Grizzly Club structured, or who are your targets, and how is that evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you're exactly right. And again, one of the things 3 years ago coming in, we had relatively no alumni. At least now we have some alumni, so that's a good thing, and that number continues to grow, obviously, each year now as we continue to grow. But, it's just like a lot of other small institutions, and even some of your mid-major type institutions. We're targeting parents, we're targeting friends of the program, we're targeting local businesses that already have some type of affinity to not only Georgia Gwinnett or Georgia Gwinnett athletics, but to Lawrenceville, to Gwinnett County, those businesses that want to be involved with students. They want to see students succeed, and they like what we're doing here outside of just on the fields and courts of competition. We're doing a lot of community service. We're doing a lot of things with our student athletes that I think a lot of schools like us aren't doing right now. In terms of some programming that we have. We've got a new, what we're calling the Grizzly Champions initiative this year, where we're doing some, social media training. We're doing etiquette training. We're going to do an etiquette dinner at the end of the year for our student athletes. We're doing some study skills, how to treat your fellow students. Just a lot of different things that we're trying to do to take this up a notch, where it's not just an athletics, experience, that it's really an all-rounded social, personal experience for our students.
Right. So now that you've been in this a few years and you've got some sports competing at very high levels, and you look back and you can exhale a little bit, what do you think are the keys for, if somebody were in this situation, similar situation, starting from scratch, or even just considering starting new sports to add to their existing program, are there some key things that you think are really important to make sure are in place or commitments made to in order to make this go?
Well, certainly buy-in from the administration is huge. I mean, the president has to be on board. If you don't have a president that's on board, in my opinion, you can kind of forget it. I mean, you can push and push, but you've got to have the president and senior administration on board. Funding is always going to be important. We really could have come in a year before that I was here and had a year to build up, because really you never have enough funding. Even though we're funded pretty well on the level that we're at, you never have enough funding. And so from building the fundraising base, as well as building the infrastructure, because I think the thing that people don't realize, and an institution like this didn't realize, they thought they did, but they really didn't, was the impact that intercollegiate athletics has on the entire campus. You don't realize the impact that it has on the admissions office, or on the development office, or on the financial aid office, or on the external relations office, because they'd never had it before. And at an institution like this, a lot of the folks that work here had never worked at an institution with athletics. And so we're trying to not only build bridges throughout the community and throughout the town, we're trying to build bridges on campus. And you already get a connotation one way or the other of what athletics brings to a campus, and they're either going to think this is a good thing or this is a not so good thing. And so you've got to make sure those that think it's not so good thing to say, you look, this is what we're bringing to the table, from our grade point averages to our the types of leadership that our student athletes are going to bring to a campus, so on and so forth. So I think one of the things that, and I've talked to several people before about starting new programs, is you always expect the unexpected. And so there have been things here that I thought would be easy and no-brainer, and this is how we do things. Like, what do you mean this is how we do things? We've never done it like that before. And well, I understand that. And so you have to really build that bridge. And it's daily work. It's daily communication, and it's daily building bridges throughout the campus.
Sure. Well, 6 sports up and running, competing very successfully, but where do you go from here? You're a member of the NAIA, 6 sports, 3 for men, 3 for women. What does the future hold? What are the plans for the next 5 years or 10 years?
Sure, great question. We would eventually like to get to 10 sports. 10 or 11 is kind of the goal here right now. We'll look at golf probably next in the next 3, 4, 5 years. I would love to start men's and women's golf, depending on Title IX and where our numbers all shake out. It could just be women's golf, and then we'd like to finish up with basketball eventually, and those would be kind of our 10 sports that we would go with and compete with. And we're happy right now where we are. We're happy with the NAIA. We're happy with the product that we're putting out on the fields and courts right now. But as you know, collegiate athletics is changing daily and certainly yearly, and so we'll continue to monitor and see where things go, and again, from a funding standpoint and what makes sense for Georgia Gwinnett College as we move into the future.
Well, it seems like you're well on your way to some very bright future, at least. I want to transition now, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts about Georgia Gwinnett, but on a more global perspective, I always ask everybody their thoughts about leadership today, and in particular intercollegiate athletics. There's a lot of scrutiny of what's happening within the NCAA or amateur sports in general, but as you boil it down to leadership, I want to ask you your thoughts about what is good leadership? What does it look like? What do good leaders do? So just share your thoughts on what leadership is today, or should be.
Sure, and I'm obviously, from my seat, I'm a big leadership guy, as you can imagine. But I think your best leaders and your best organizations work well when there's a lot of transparency that's out there, when there's a lot of honesty that's out there. A lot of times we have to have frank conversations that aren't always pleasant conversations. But I know from my seat, and if I'm sitting across the table, I would always rather hear the truth, even if it's going to smack me. So we can deal with that and then move forward. So, honesty and integrity are key to me. Being transparent, certainly as much as you can. I mean, there are things that we all know you have to kind of keep close to your vest at times, but being as transparent with the organization as you can. And then for me as well, and I think that's one thing that's worked quite well, not only here, but even at Union, is really being able to delegate and delegate authority and responsibility to those that you lead, and then giving them the ability to go and run with the task. There are going to be times where they're going to fail and they're going to need some help. But as a young coach and as a young leader myself, it was critical for me to be able to go and carry out items and either fail or succeed, on my own, and then be able to go back and evaluate, okay, what went right, what went wrong. And I think if you ask our staff, particularly here today, they would all tell you that certainly I hire folks that can come in, do their jobs with some passion, with our mission, with our vision, and I'm going to get out of the way. And when they need me, they can come in and ask, and I'll give them any advice or any help that I can. And if I need to go and have a conversation with someone that they can't get to because of where they are in the organization, but I can, I'll certainly do that. But I think it's critical that you learn to delegate, and you learn to delegate well. And then you follow up and you give that support. And when your staff has to have the ability to feel like they can fail a little bit to grow. And, professional development's huge for me. We try to get all of our folks in some type of external professional development. We do some leadership on our own. I've taken our staff through John Maxwell's Make the Day Count. We do a staff development. 2 weeks ago we came in. This was really interesting. We came in and had personality assessments. So we brought an outside group in, and we all sat around after we had taken our personality assessments and then looked at that, and not only looked at it from our perspective, but then looked at it, how does that relate to our group, and how does that relate to our group dynamics? And, you know, when you start looking around the room, people start smiling and snickering a little bit, because those who work well together, all of a sudden you see why they work well together. And those who have some problems with each other, you say, well, there's where the tension is, and the tension in the room. And I think the more that we can learn about each other, and the more that we can learn about each other as a staff, and the more trust that we can have, you know, the better off we're going to be. So.
On a related note, I think there are many young people today looking to break into the industry. You know, they want to get their first job in intercollegiate athletics, or they want to advance their careers, and there are literally hundreds of graduate programs in athletic administration or sport management, and the reality is there are probably far more graduates each year than there are actual jobs, and everyone's always looking for some advantage. How can they better position themselves either to get that first job or to advance in their career? And I'm wondering, you may have these types of conversations with students from time to time, but what advice do you have? Somebody looking to get in and really get that first job or advance their career once they do get that first job, what advice do you have for those up-and-comers?
Well, and you're right. I get this question weekly, especially here, not only from our students, but emails from students across the country that are looking to get into intercollegiate athletics. And, one thing that I tell them up front, I try to be honest, it's tough. It's a tough deal right now, because with the internet, with ESPN, with everything that's going on, intercollegiate athletics is at an all-time high. And so a lot of people want to be and feel like they want to be in this industry. So I try to be honest right up front, it's tough. But secondly, there's nothing to me that replaces hard work. I mean, you've got to get in and you've got to have a great work ethic. And so whatever ground level job you can find, whether it's paid or unpaid, you find that institution, you make that connection, whether it's via Twitter or LinkedIn, or you're going to a convention, or you're going and knocking on AD's doors, or you're trying to make appointments, whatever you've got to do to get your foot in the door, and then you show somebody that you're willing to work, and you're willing to learn, and you're not below tasks that you're assigned or you're given. I don't think anything replaces hard work today, just as it has, in the past. But I think that's critically important, and I think you've just got to beat the bushes and send those emails and keep, working the job circuit. And again, the hard work will eventually pay off.
Yeah. And finally, I want to ask you, as you are in your role as an athletic director over the last two institutions, are there things that stand out in your mind when you see a candidate? Like, are there some characteristics, some traits that you see that this is a person I want to hire?
Well, certainly, I think when they're sitting in front of you, there are some traits. I mean, I like someone that's well presented, that dresses well, that shows themselves well, they can speak. They can look you in the eye. They can, give you a firm handshake. They can do all of those types of things when they're one-on-one. For me personally, it's really a gut check. It's those that fit with the mission, that fit with the institution, that have the integrity, that have the work ethic, that are the type of people that I would want my kids to be around. That I would want, our coaches to be around and our student athletes to be around. And that's why we work so hard and are trying to be so intentional on who we hire, because, as you know, you're spending more time with these folks than you are your family most of the time. And so you've got to be able to work well together. You've got to be able to fight well together. And then at the end of the day, you've got to be able to come out and be one concerted effort, one concerted group as you move forward.
Well, Darin, we have come to the end of our time. But I do want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and spending some time with us and really sharing insights on what it's been like to get Georgia Gwinnett's college's program up and running.
Well, absolutely. Mark, again, thank you. I think this is great what you're doing. And anytime you can promote small college athletics and we get the chance to promote Georgia Gwinnett, that's great. So thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate that. This has been Perspective on Athletics with Dr. Darin Wilson, Athletic Director at Georgia Gwinnett College.